Some memories they feel different, right? They're so incredibly vivid, so detailed. It's almost like you took a mental photograph of a single moment in time. Well, today, we're going to take a closer look at those photographs, and you might be surprised by what we find in the fine print. Go on, think about it for a second. I bet a super detailed scene just popped right into your head. You probably remember the room, who was with you, maybe even what the weather was like. Well, this incredibly powerful phenomenon actually has a name. Back in 1977, a couple of researchers, Brown and Kulik, they gave it the name Flashbulb Memory. And it's a perfect name, right? The idea was that our brains, when hit with some shocking public news, basically press a giant print now button. And ka-chunk, the moment is preserved forever, just like an old-school photograph. So let's get into it. What exactly is it that makes this mental flashbulb go off in the first place? It's almost always a major public event, something that carries a huge emotional weight and a ton of surprise. We're talking about national tragedies, like the Challenger explosion, but also huge victories like the fall of the Berlin Wall. But here's the absolute key. The memory isn't really about the event itself. It's about the moment you found out about it. And this slide right here highlights a super important distinction we have to make. On one hand, you've got your personal flashbulb memory. That's your story. Then there's what we call event memory. Those are the objective, public facts about what happened. And of course, there's firsthand memory for people who were actually there. For our purposes, we are zeroing in on that personal flashbulb moment. So for a long time, the theory was that these memories were permanent, that they were totally unchangeable. But is that mental photograph really in perfect focus? Well, science. It had to put that to the test. This is the million-dollar question, isn't it? If these memories feel so special, so permanent, are they actually more reliable than, say, your memory of what you had for breakfast last week? Researchers needed a way to actually measure this over time. And they came up with this really clever method called the test-retest method. It's actually pretty simple. First, they record someone's memory right after a big event happens, while it's still fresh. Then they wait, sometimes for months, sometimes for years. And after all that time has passed, they go back and ask for the memory again. Finally, they just compare the two versions to see what's changed. And when they started comparing those before and after memories, well, what they found was genuinely shocking. It completely changed how we think about the connection between our feelings and the facts inside our own heads. Okay, so here's the big reveal. Flashbulb memories are not perfect. Not even close. It turns out they decay and they change just like any other memory we have. People forget details, they mix up the order of things, they even add new bits that never actually happened. That perfect photograph? Yeah, it gets pretty blurry over time. This chart just visualizes the whole paradox perfectly. Okay, look at the first set of bars. That's consistency, or how accurate the memory is. See how it drops over time for both flashbulb memories and just regular everyday memories? They fade at about the same rate. But now look at the confidence bars. For everyday memories, as they fade, our confidence drops too. Makes sense. But for flashbulb memories, our confidence stays sky high, even while the memory itself is falling apart. That's the puzzle. So how do these errors even get in there? Well, a really common one is something called time slice confusion. This is where you might have this incredibly vivid memory of learning the news from the TV, but that was actually the second or third time you heard about it. The very first time might have just been a quick text from a friend, but your brain kind of mashes these moments together into a better story, and once that new flawed story is locked in, you tend to tell it that way with total confidence forever. Which, of course, leads us to this massive question. If the memory is so flawed, why on earth are we so completely convinced that it's perfect? I mean, what is it about these memories that makes our belief in them so unshakable? The answer, it turns out, has way less to do with how accurate the memory is, and everything to do with what it means to us as people. The psychologist Ulrich Neisser just hit the nail on the head with this quote. He said these memories are the places we line up our lives with the source of history itself and say, I was there. They're landmarks. They are those rare moments where our small personal story intersects with the giant sweeping story of history with a capital H. They become part of who we are. And because this memory is so personally important, our story about it becomes really stubborn. Once an error gets baked in, we tend to stick with it. It's our story now. Now, what's really interesting is that our memory for the public facts of the event that can actually be corrected over time, usually because of news reports and documentaries. Here's a fantastic example from the 9/11 studies. A little while after the attacks, a lot of people actually misremembered where President Bush was when he heard the news. But then, Michael Moore's film Fahrenheit 9/11 came out, and it had that now famous footage of him sitting in the Florida classroom. And after that, the public's event memory for that specific fact got way better. The media basically corrected the historical record for them. All right, let's bring this all home. What's the big takeaway from this deep dive into our most powerful memories? Why does this even matter? Let's just do a quick recap to lock this in. First, flashbulb memories feel perfect, but the research shows they're not. Second, their accuracy fades away just like any other memory. Third, the thing that makes them truly different is our unshakable, through-the-roof confidence in them. And finally, that incredible confidence comes from the powerful role they play in connecting our own life story to the bigger story of history. And look, this isn't just some neat psychology fact. It's a huge lesson that feeling absolutely certain about a memory and that memory actually being accurate, well, those are two totally different things. And that matters everywhere, from our own personal lives all the way to the legal system, where an eyewitness's confidence is so often mistaken for accuracy. So I'm going to leave you with this one final thought to chew on. If our most vivid, most emotional memories, the ones that feel literally burned into our minds, can be this fragile and this unreliable, what does that say about all the rest of them? It really makes you think, doesn't it?